Vivian believed she had complete control over her life. Every morning planned out, every detail organized, every walk with her poodle Daisy in the park following the perfect schedule. She never imagined that an unruly golden retriever could change everything in a matter of seconds, much less that this dog would bring back the most irritating and impossible man she'd ever met, the very same one who was now her upstairs neighbor. But what came after that chaos would forever change both their lives. If you're enjoying this story, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? Your energy and support are the fuel that keeps this channel alive and full of exciting stories. Tuesday morning started exactly as Vivian had planned. At 6:15, the alarm went off with Swiss precision. By 6:45, she was already dressed in her impeccable grey suit, hair pulled back in an elegant bun, subtle makeup applied with the same military discipline that governed every aspect of her life. At 7:10, she was walking down the hallway of her building toward the elevator, with Daisy, her caramel-colored miniature poodle, trotting obediently beside her. "Come on, girl. 15 minutes at the park, then Mommy has to go to work," Vivian murmured, adjusting Daisy's pink collar as they waited for the elevator to come down. Rock Creek Park at that hour of the morning was her private sanctuary. Few people, fresh air, and the soothing routine that mentally prepared her for another day at the law firm. Vivian had timed everything. 7 minutes walking to the park, 15 minutes strolling the same route as always, 7 minutes back. Perfect. She had barely taken 10 steps on the grass when chaos erupted. A golden blur emerged from the bushes like a four-legged hurricane, running toward them with the speed of a guided missile. Cooper, a massive golden retriever clearly lacking any sense of personal boundaries, skidded to a halt in front of Daisy, sprayed water from a nearby puddle in all directions, and began sniffing the little poodle with uncontrolled enthusiasm. "Hey, hey, no!" Vivian shouted, trying to pull Daisy away from the furry giant. But Cooper had decided that Daisy was his new best friend and started running in circles around both of them, tangling their leashes in a chaotic dance. "Cooper! Cooper! Get back here, you delinquent!" The masculine voice that echoed through the bushes made Vivian's blood freeze in her veins. She knew that voice, deep with a slight accent he'd never been able to completely disguise, and that tone of natural authority that had always deeply irritated her. Elliot Bennett emerged from the vegetation, dark hair disheveled, running shirt clinging to his sweaty body, and that sideways smile he used to wear when he knew he'd caused some kind of trouble. His eyes met hers, and for a second, the world seemed to pause. "Vivian, you've got to be kidding me," she whispered, more to herself than to him. Elliot stopped a few feet away, clearly as surprised as she was. "What are you doing here?" "I live here, Elliot. The question is, what are you doing here?" "I live here too," he replied, approaching slowly while trying to untangle the leashes that Cooper had turned into a true work of abstract art. "I moved in 2 weeks ago. Riverside Towers, apartment 4B. Vivian's stomach dropped. Riverside Towers was exactly the building where she lived. Apartment 4B meant he lived upstairs. Right. Above. Her. "No," she murmured, shaking her head. "No, no, no, this cannot be happening." "Apparently it is," Elliot said with a smile she remembered all too well, half amusement, half provocation. "And it looks like our four-legged kids have already become great friends." It was true. While they were talking, Cooper and Daisy had freed themselves from the leash tangle and were now playing together as if they were old acquaintances. Cooper crouched in a play position, wagging his tail frantically, while Daisy, who was normally reserved with strangers, ran around him with an energy Vivian had never seen before. "Daisy, come here." "Now," Vivian commanded, but her poodle completely ignored her, too busy nibbling Cooper's ear in a game that seemed to go on forever. "She's beautiful," Elliot commented, watching the two creatures. "How old?" 3. "And she prefers the company of civilized people," Vivian replied dryly, still trying to process the fact that the man she'd sworn never to see again was now apparently her neighbor. "Ouch," Elliot laughed, dramatically placing his hand on his chest. "Right in the heart. I see you haven't lost your sharp tongue. And you haven't lost your talent for showing up in the most inconvenient places possible." They stood in silence for a moment, watching the dogs play. The tension in the air was almost palpable, mixed with something more complex that Vivian didn't want to analyze. Elliot was thinner than she remembered, more mature too. The lines around his eyes were new, as was the small scar near his left eyebrow. "Look, Viv, don't call me that," she interrupted quickly. "Just don't." "Vivian," he corrected, and there was something different in his voice now. Softer. "I know things ended badly between us, but we're adults. We can be civilized, can't we?" Before she could answer, Cooper decided it was time for a new adventure and went running toward a family of ducks near the lake, with Daisy following closely behind. Both owners ran after them, shouting commands that were completely ignored by the four-legged fugitives. 10 minutes later, they managed to retrieve the dogs, but not before Cooper decided to take a spontaneous dive into the lake, and Daisy, not wanting to be left out, followed him in. When they finally got hold of the leashes again, both dogs were soaked, covered in mud, and clearly thrilled with their adventure. "Oh my God," Vivian murmured, looking at Daisy, who looked like a small swamp monster. "She's never done this before." "Cooper has that influence on people," Elliot said, trying to clean the mud off his dog's snout with his shirt. "And apparently on dogs, too." That's when Vivian noticed the problem. In the confusion of the chase and aquatic rescue, the leashes had gotten mixed up. Daisy's delicate pink collar was now around Cooper's neck, while Cooper's sturdy black collar hung from Daisy's tiny neck. "You've got to be kidding me," she sighed. "At least now we have an excuse to see each other again," Elliot said, and there was something in his tone that made her heart race in a way she definitely didn't want to analyze. Vivian looked at him, then at the dogs, who continued playing as if they were childhood friends, and felt that her perfectly organized routine had just been thrown out the window. And the worst part was that a small part of her, a part she desperately tried to ignore, didn't mind that one bit. "Tomorrow, same time," she said quickly, picking Daisy up in her arms. "You bring the pink collar, I'll bring the black one." "It's a date," Elliot replied with that sideways smile, and Vivian felt her cheeks flush involuntarily. As she walked back home with Daisy dripping in her arms, a single question echoed in her mind. How the hell had she just agreed to see Elliot Bennett again? The next morning, Vivian woke up to the sound of jazz playing upstairs. It wasn't just music. It was loud music, with dramatic saxophones and enthusiastic pianists who seemed to be playing directly in her ear. She looked at the clock. 6 in the morning. Sharp. "You've got to be kidding me," she murmured into her pillow, pulling the covers over her head. But the jazz continued, relentless and absurdly upbeat for that hour of the morning. Daisy, who normally slept until 7, was sitting on the bed looking at the ceiling with her ears perked up, clearly as bewildered as her owner by the involuntary morning symphony. Vivian tried to ignore it. She really did. She put the pillow over her head, squeezed her eyes shut, and tried to go back to sleep. But it was impossible. The music wasn't just loud, it was good. Irritatingly good. The kind of sophisticated jazz she secretly loved but would never admit to, especially coming from Elliot Bennett's apartment. By 7:15, when she finally gave up trying to sleep, Vivian was officially in a bad mood. She dressed with sharp movements, brushed her teeth harder than necessary, and put Daisy's leash on with a tension the little poodle definitely noticed. "Let's settle this once and for all," she muttered as she left the apartment. The elevator arrived at the exact moment the doors to apartment 4B opened. Elliot emerged wearing an impeccable navy suit, hair perfectly styled, with Cooper by his side, who Vivian noted with irritation was wearing an elegant brown leather collar that probably cost more than her shoes. They stared at each other for a second before entering the elevator simultaneously, creating an awkward silence that seemed to take up all available space. "Good morning," Elliot said, pressing the ground floor button. "It would be if some people didn't think 6 in the morning was an appropriate time for a jazz festival," Vivian replied, staring fixedly at the elevator numbers. "Oh, that." Elliot had the decency to look slightly embarrassed. "Sorry. I always listen to music when I'm getting ready for work. It helps me focus. That's what headphones are for." "You're right," he admitted, and there was a sincerity in his voice that caught her off guard. "It won't happen again." Vivian stared at him, looking for signs of the sarcasm she remembered so well, but he seemed genuinely sorry, which somehow irritated her even more than if he'd been sarcastic. The doors opened on the ground floor, and they walked out together, heading toward the building exit in a silence that stretched uncomfortably. That's when Vivian realized that Cooper was wearing Daisy's delicate pink collar, which looked absurdly small on his sturdy neck, while Daisy was dragging Cooper's heavy collar across the floor. "The collars," she said, stopping abruptly. "Right, the collars." Elliot stopped too, and for a moment they just looked at each other, neither making a move to resolve the practical situation that had brought them together. Vivian started, but was interrupted by the arrival of the doorman, Mr. Martinez, who watched them with barely disguised curiosity. "Good morning, Mrs. Carter. I see you've met our new resident." "Met is an interesting word," Vivian murmured, but Elliot extended his hand to the doorman with that natural charm she remembered all too well. "Elliot Bennett, nice to meet you." "Mr. Martinez, welcome to the building. And what a beautiful dog. They seem like great friends." It was true. While the adults exchanged tense pleasantries, Cooper and Daisy had lain down side by side on the cool marble of the lobby, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "Apparently so," Vivian said dryly. "Mr. Martinez, I need to leave for work. Mr. Bennett, can we swap the collars quickly?" "Of course." Elliot knelt down to remove the pink collar from Cooper's neck, and Vivian did the same with Daisy. Their hands touched briefly when he handed her the pink collar, and Vivian felt an electric current run up her arm, a sensation that irritated her deeply. "Thank you," she said quickly, putting the pink collar on Daisy with efficient movements. "Vivian," Elliot said as she headed for the door. She stopped but didn't turn around. "I really am sorry about the music. And, well, about everything else too." She turned then and saw something in his eyes she didn't expect. Vulnerability, perhaps, or genuine regret. It was unsettling. "Just keep the volume down, okay?" "Promise." The following days became a strange dance of near misses and mutual avoidance. Vivian started leaving home 5 minutes earlier to avoid the shared elevator, but inevitably they'd run into each other in the lobby, the building's laundry room, or at the mailboxes. On Thursday, she found him in the laundry room at 9 at night, transferring clothes from the washer to the dryer. He was wearing faded jeans and a simple t-shirt, very different from the impeccable executive she saw in the mornings. "Sorry," he said, quickly closing the dryer. "I didn't know you used the laundry room at this time." "It's a building, Elliot. It's not like we can avoid each other forever." "True." He leaned against the machine, crossing his arms. "How's work been?" "Do you really want to know, or are you just making polite conversation?" "I really want to know." There was something in his voice, a sincerity she wasn't prepared to deal with. "Busy. I'm working on a big corporate merger case. And yours?" "Busy too. Strategic consulting. Lots of meetings, lots of numbers, lots of people trying to impress me." "Sounds familiar," she said, and for a second she almost smiled. On Friday, it was the mailbox's turn. Vivian was checking her mail when she felt a presence behind her. She turned around to find Elliot waiting patiently, with a stack of mail in his hands. "You were always this organized with bills," he commented, watching her methodically sort the letters by category. "And you were always this observant about things that aren't your business," she shot back, but there was less venom in her voice than she'd intended. Touché. It was on Saturday that the situation got really complicated. Vivian was coming back from grocery shopping, arms full of bags, when the elevator stopped on the 4th floor. The doors opened to reveal Elliot leaving his apartment, clearly getting ready to go out too. He saw her struggling with the bags and, without asking, took half of them. "I can handle it myself," she protested. "I know you can, but you don't have to." They entered the elevator together, and Vivian couldn't help but notice the scent of his cologne, something woody and expensive that reminded her of nights she preferred to forget. "Thank you," she said reluctantly when they reached the 3rd floor. "You're welcome." He held the elevator doors open while she got out. "Vivian?" "Yes?" "I know you don't want to hear this, but I really am sorry about everything that happened between us." She stopped in front of her door, still holding her keys. "Elliot, I'm not trying to rewrite history or pretend things were different than they were. I just wanted you to know." The elevator doors started to close, and he made no move to stop them. Vivian watched him disappear and for a long moment stood in the hallway. listening to the sound of the elevator going down. That night, she couldn't sleep. Not because of the music. Elliot had kept his promise and the mornings were quiet. But because of the expression in his eyes when he apologized. There was a maturity there she didn't remember, a vulnerability that made her uncomfortable. Because as much as she tried to deny it, a small part of her, a part that grew with each forced encounter, was starting to wonder if maybe, just maybe, people really could change. On Monday morning, Vivian found the first note. It was stuck to her door when she left for work, a small cream-colored paper, with the elegant handwriting she recognized immediately. Elliot's slanted, confident script that used to sign million-dollar contracts with the same ease other people wrote shopping lists. Sorry again about the music. To make up for it, I left something special in the lobby for Daisy. E. Vivian took the stairs instead of the elevator, driven by a curiosity she refused to acknowledge. In the lobby, Mr. E. Martinez was smiling suspiciously while holding a small pink box. "You have an admirer," he said with a twinkle in his eyes. He said it was for little Daisy. Inside the box was a plush toy, a small golden saxophone that made a soft sound when pressed. Daisy immediately fell in love with it, carrying it on her leash during their entire morning walk. "Very funny," Vivian murmured to herself, but couldn't help a small smile when Daisy started playing her new instrument in the middle of the park. On Tuesday, another note appeared. "Hope Daisy liked the saxophone. I saw you smiling yesterday at the park. Yes, I was watching from the window. Sorry for being a stalker. Today's special coffee day in the lobby." Say, when she went downstairs, there was a professional espresso machine installed in the corner of the lobby, with a note, "Courtesy of apartment 4B, for all residents who deserve to start their day right." Mr. Martinez was practically vibrating with excitement. "Your neighbor installed this early this morning, said he wanted to do something nice for the building." Vivian had a perfect cappuccino, exactly how she liked it, with cinnamon sprinkled on top, and couldn't deny it was much better than the watered-down coffee at the office. On Wednesday, the note came with something that made her heart skip a beat. "I remembered you were always obsessed with macarons. Stopped by La Durée today and thought you might like these. The color reminded me of your eyes." The small box contained 6 hazelnut-colored macarons, exactly the color of Vivian's eyes, a golden brown shade he always said was his favorite color. They were perfect, delicate, and probably expensive as hell, considering the nearest La Durée was across town. Vivian stood in the middle of the lobby holding the box, feeling a mixture of anger and something dangerously close to tenderness. "He remembered," she whispered, lightly touching the box lid. That night, she ate all 6 macarons while watching Netflix, and each bite brought back memories she'd tried to bury. Elliot bringing her French macarons when she was studying for the bar exam. Elliot learning to pronounce macaron correctly just to impress her. "Elliot, stop it," she said out loud to the empty apartment. Daisy looked up from her plush saxophone and gazed at her with canine concern. On Thursday, she decided to fight back. She left a note on his door. "Thanks for the macarons. Daisy loved the saxophone, but you don't need to keep buying me forgiveness. V." The response came the same day, stuck to her door when she got home from work. "I'm not trying to buy forgiveness. I'm trying to show you that I remember the little things that used to make you happy. Do they still?" E. Vivian read the note 3 times before crumpling it up. Then she uncrumpled it and put it in the kitchen drawer along with the others. On Friday, there was no note. Vivian found herself checking her door twice before leaving for work, feeling a strange disappointment when she found nothing. In the elevator, she ran into Elliot, coming back from what looked like a morning run. He was wearing running shorts and a sweat-soaked t-shirt, dark hair stuck to his forehead. It was irritating how he managed to look attractive even after working out. "No note today," she heard herself asking, immediately regretting the words. "I thought maybe you wanted a break from my charm campaign," he replied, but there was a small smile playing on his lips. "It wasn't a charm campaign." "No? It was—" She hesitated, searching for the right words. "It was nostalgic. Nostalgic." He repeated the word as if he were tasting wine. "Is that good or bad? I haven't decided yet." The elevator doors opened on the 3rd floor, and Vivian stepped out, but turned around before the doors closed. "Elliot, yeah, the macarons were perfect." The smile that spread across his face was like sunrise, slow, warm, and impossible to ignore. That night, Vivian was on her balcony with a glass of red wine when she heard soft music coming from upstairs. It wasn't loud jazz this time. It was something classical, melancholy, played at low volume. Piano, maybe Chopin. She closed her eyes and let herself be carried away by the music, feeling something in her chest she hadn't felt in a long time. It wasn't happiness exactly, but it was possibility. On Saturday morning, she found another note, but this time it was different. I know you like Chopin. I have a collection of rare vinyl records I inherited from my grandfather. If you want to hear real music, not just streaming, my door is always open. No strings attached, no hidden agenda, just music. P.S. Cooper has missed Daisy these past few days. I think they became better friends than we ever were. Vivian held the note for a long time, watching through the lobby window as Cooper and Daisy played in the building's garden. They really did look like best friends. Cooper protecting Daisy from bigger dogs, Daisy sharing her treats with the gentle giant. Maybe, she murmured to herself, carefully folded the note and put it in her pocket. Maybe some armor was meant to have cracks. That afternoon, for the first time in weeks, Vivian didn't plan every minute of her day. Instead, she sat on the balcony with Daisy in her lap, listened to the soft music coming from upstairs, and allowed herself to feel something she'd buried long ago. Curiosity. Curiosity about who Elliot had become in the years they'd spent apart. Curiosity about whether he'd really changed as much as he seemed to. And scariest of all, curiosity about what would happen if she let those cracks in her armor grow just a little bit more. Friday had been hell. Vivian left the office at 10 at night, after 14 hours dealing with impossible clients, contracts that seemed written in hieroglyphics, and a boss who decided that urgent meant yesterday. Her feet ached in her high heels, her head was pounding, and she was so exhausted she almost missed the subway twice. When she finally got to the building, all she wanted was a hot shower, a large glass of wine, and maybe to cry a little before sleeping. But the elevator was broken, and she had to climb 3 flights of stairs carrying her heavy briefcase and the heels she'd taken off halfway up. It was on the 2nd floor that the tears started. They weren't dramatic or hysterical tears, just the silent, frustrated kind that come when you're at the absolute limit of your endurance. She leaned against the hallway wall, closed her eyes, and tried to gather strength to climb one more floor. "Vivian?" Elliot's voice made her open her eyes immediately. He was coming down the stairs, probably returning from work too, but he looked much better than she felt. When he saw her face, his expression instantly changed from surprise to genuine concern. "Hey, are you okay?" "I'm fine," she lied, quickly wiping the tears with the back of her hand. "Just a long day, Vivian." His voice was softer now, almost gentle. "When was the last time you ate something?" The question caught her off guard. I had coffee this morning." "Coffee isn't food." He came down a few more steps until he was at the same level as her. "Come with me." "Elliot, I just need to get to my apartment and—" "When was the last time you had a real meal?" he insisted. Vivian stopped to think and realized she couldn't remember. Maybe yesterday at lunch? Or was it the day before? "Exactly," Elliot said, as if he could read her expression. "You're coming upstairs with me. I'm making dinner." "You don't need to—" "Vivian." There was something in his voice that made her stop protesting. "Please, let me take care of you for one night." 20 minutes later, she was sitting on Elliot's couch, wearing a borrowed t-shirt that smelled like fabric softener and masculinity, while he moved around the kitchen with an efficiency that surprised her. His apartment was beautiful, dark wood furniture, modern art on the walls, and an impressive vinyl collection exactly like he'd mentioned. "Since when do you cook?" she asked, watching him chop vegetables with precise movements. "I learned after a lot of things," he replied, without stopping his chopping. "I discovered that cooking calms me. It's meditative." The smell coming from the kitchen was incredible. Garlic, ginger, soy sauce, and something else she couldn't identify. Her stomach growled loudly enough for both of them to hear. "For God's sake, Vivian," Elliot laughed, shaking his head. "How did you let it get to this point?" "I was busy saving the corporate world," she replied dryly, but without the usual venom. Exhaustion had stripped away all her defenses. "Ah, right, the old excuse." "It's not an excuse. It's the reality of being a senior attorney at a major firm. I know. His voice became more serious. I know that life, remember? The difference is, I learned it's not worth it if you don't take care of yourself in the process. 15 minutes later, he placed a plate in front of her, stir-fried chicken with vegetables and jasmine rice, everything perfectly seasoned and presented as if it had come from an expensive restaurant. My God, she murmured after the first bite. This is incredible. Thank you. He sat on the other side of the couch, his own plate in his hands. Now, tell me about your hellish day. And to her own surprise, she did. She talked about the impossible client who changed his mind every 5 minutes, about the contract that needed to be rewritten 3 times, about her boss who treated her like she was a machine instead of a person. Elliot listened without interrupting her, making occasional comments that showed he was really paying attention. When she finished, he went to the kitchen and came back with a bottle of red wine. Now it's my turn, he said, pouring 2 glasses. Want to hear about my terrible day? You had a terrible day too. I lost a $3 million client because the CEO decided he didn't like the color of my tie. You're kidding. Unfortunately not. He took a sip of wine. Apparently navy blue reminds him of his daughter's ex-husband. Vivian laughed, the first genuine laugh she'd had in weeks. That's ridiculous. Welcome to the world of high-level business, where rational decisions go to die. They kept talking while they finished the wine. Elliot told stories about eccentric clients, and she shared some of the most absurd situations she'd faced in court. It was easy, easier than she remembered conversations could be. Can I ask you something? Vivian said when comfortable silence settled between them. Sure. Why did you really move here? To this building, I mean. Elliot swirled the wine in his glass, thoughtful. Honestly, I didn't know you lived here when I signed the lease. It was a coincidence. What kind of coincidence? The kind that makes you question whether the universe has a sense of humor. He looked at her directly. But now that I'm here, I don't know. Maybe some coincidences happen for a reason. Elliot, I know I screwed everything up between us, Vivian. I know I hurt you, that I was selfish and immature. But these past few years, they changed me. I changed. There was something in his voice, a vulnerability she'd never heard before. How? I learned that success means nothing if you don't have anyone to share it with. I learned that pride is cold comfort when you're alone. And I learned that losing someone you love through your own stupidity is the kind of regret that haunts you forever. Vivian's heart sped up. Elliot, I'm not asking for anything, he said quickly. I'm not trying to win you back or pretend we can turn back time. I just wanted you to know that I became a better man. And a big part of that was because of what I lost when I lost you. They sat in silence for a long moment, their gazes connected across the space between them on the couch. The TV murmured softly in the background. The dogs had settled together on the rug, and the outside world seemed to have disappeared. Thank you, Vivian said finally, her voice almost a whisper. For what? For feeding me, for listening to me, for... She hesitated. For reminding me what it feels like to be cared for. That's when Elliot leaned toward her, slowly giving her time to pull away if she wanted to. But she didn't pull away. Instead, her eyes closed when he gently touched her face, and when their lips met, it was as if no time had passed at all. The kiss was tender, questioning, full of years of hurt and regret, but also hope. When they separated, Vivian rested her forehead against his, breathing heavily. This complicates everything, she whispered. I know, he replied, running his thumb across her cheek, but some complications are worth it, and for the first time in years, Vivian allowed herself to believe that maybe he was right. In the 2 weeks that followed dinner, Vivian discovered that falling in love with Elliot Bennett again was like rediscovering a favorite song after years. Familiar, but with nuances she hadn't noticed before. It all started with the little things. The Monday after, she found a perfectly prepared gin and tonic waiting at her door when she came back from work, along with a note, to go with the sunset on the balcony. If you want company, I'll be up here. E. She hesitated for just a moment before going up to the 4th floor. Elliot was on his balcony, bare feet propped up on the railing, an identical drink in his hand. When he saw her, he smiled, not that confident smile she remembered, but something softer, more genuine. "I thought you might need this after another day saving the corporate world," he said, making room for her in the chair beside him. "How did you know it was another difficult day?" she asked, settling down next to him. "Because they're always difficult days for you. It's who you are. You give yourself completely to everything you do." "That sounds more like a weakness than a virtue." "It's one of the things I admire most about you," he said simply, and the sincerity in his voice made something in her chest tighten. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the city. The gin was perfect, ice cold, with exactly the right amount of tonic, and a cucumber slice she didn't even know she liked until Elliot had started making them that way years ago. "You remember," she said, more to herself than to him. "I remember everything about you, Vivian." The intimacy of his words caught her off guard. She looked at him sideways, observing his profile against the orange sky. He was different, more relaxed, less guarded, as if he'd learned to be comfortable in his own skin. "Elliot." "Yeah?" "Thank you. For this." She gestured between them, trying to find words for whatever was happening. "You don't need to thank me. I should be thanking you for giving me a chance." On Thursday, she was working late at home when she heard soft music coming from upstairs. It wasn't Chopin this time. It was something more modern, jazzy, and enveloping. Ella Fitzgerald, maybe, or Billie Holiday. Without thinking much about it, she went out to her balcony. The music was clearer there, floating through the night like an intimate conversation between old friends. "Are you listening?" Elliot appeared on his balcony, leaning on the railing to look down at her. "It's beautiful," she admitted. "Want to come up? I have a vinyl collection you've never seen." This time she didn't hesitate. His apartment at night was different, cozier, with soft yellow lights and scented candles that smelled like sandalwood and cedar. The vinyl collection he'd mentioned took up an entire wall, meticulously organized by genre and year. "My God," Vivian murmured, running her fingers over the album covers. "Some of these must be extremely rare." "Inherited from my grandfather," Elliot explained, changing the record on the vintage turntable. "He used to say that digital music would never have soul." He was right. She stopped in front of a section dedicated entirely to classic jazz. "Do you have Love in the Time of Cholera?" "The book or the movie soundtrack?" "Both, I hope." Elliot laughed and went to get both the book and the record. "You were always obsessed with that story. It's about love that transcends time and circumstances. Who wouldn't be obsessed?" "Florentino waits 51 years, 9 months and 4 days for the woman he loves," Elliot recited from memory, putting the record on to play. "Do you think it's worth it?" Vivian looked at him, surprised he remembered so many details. "You read it?" "I read it after you mentioned it for the 10th time. I wanted to understand why you found it so romantic." "And what did you think? That maybe some people are worth the wait?" The words hung between them, loaded with meaning. Vivian felt her heart speed up when she realized he wasn't talking about the book anymore. They spent the rest of the night listening to music and talking about books, movies, and memories they'd shared. When Vivian finally looked at the clock, it was 2 in the morning. "I should go," she said, but made no move to get up from the couch where they'd settled. "You should," Elliot agreed, but he didn't move either. They were closer now, she realized. Somehow, during the hours of conversation, the space between them had shrunk until she could feel the warmth of his body, the scent of his cologne mixed with the aroma of the candles. "Vivian," he said softly, and there was something in his voice that made her look directly into his eyes. "Yes? Can I?" She didn't let him finish the question. Instead, she leaned toward him, meeting his lips with hers in a kiss that was very different from the first. This one was deeper, more urgent, full of weeks of accumulated tension and suppressed desire. When they separated, both were breathless. "Maybe I really should go," she whispered against his lips. "Maybe you should," he agreed, but his hands found her face, thumb tracing her jawline. "This is moving too fast," she said, even as she leaned into his touch. "Or maybe it's moving at the right speed for the first time." Vivian closed her eyes, allowing herself to feel the moment, the soft music in the background, the gentle touch of his hands, the feeling that maybe, just maybe, she could trust him again. "Elliot? Don't hurt me again." The words came out as a whisper, vulnerable and raw. He stopped caressing her face and looked directly into her eyes. "Vivian, I'd rather cut off my own hand than hurt you again. You have my word. Promises are easy to make. Then let me show you instead of telling you." And maybe it was the music or the wine they'd shared, or simply the fact that she was tired of carrying hurt alone. But Vivian allowed herself to believe him. She leaned in again for another kiss, this one even deeper than the previous one, and when Elliot pulled her closer, she let herself melt against him. For the first time in years, Vivian allowed herself to be completely present in a moment, without worrying about consequences or protections, just her, him, and the soft music that surrounded them like a blanket. When she finally left his apartment at 4 in the morning, she was no longer running away from something. For the first time in a long time, she was walking toward something that was worth it. Monday arrived with the force of a hurricane disguised as an emergency meeting. Vivian was reviewing contracts when Margaret Chen, the firm's senior partner, appeared at her door with an expression she knew well, the same one she wore before delivering cases that would either define careers or destroy them completely. "Vivian, I need to talk to you. Now." In Margaret's office, with its glass walls offering a panoramic view of Washington, D.C., the news was delivered with the surgical precision typical of the city's most feared attorney. "The Morrison-Blackstone merger just got even bigger," Margaret said, sliding a thick folder across the table. "They've acquired 3 more companies in Europe, and that's transformed a $200 million deal into something close to $800 million. Vivian whistled softly. "That's massive. And they specifically asked for you to lead the legal team. Congratulations, you just became the lead attorney on the biggest deal in this firm's history." Vivian's heart raced. It was exactly the kind of case she'd dreamed of leading, complex, international, and with the potential to catapult her career to a completely new level. "Is there a problem?" she asked, noticing that Margaret didn't seem as enthusiastic as she should. "Maybe. The client has hired an external strategic consultant to oversee the financial aspects of the merger, someone with experience in complex international acquisitions." Margaret opened a second file and pushed a photograph toward Vivian. The world seemed to stop when she saw the familiar face smiling back at her. "Elliot Bennett," Margaret continued, carefully observing Vivian's reaction. "Do you know him?" Vivian forced her expression to remain neutral, even with her heart beating erratically in her chest. "We've met professionally a few years ago." "Great. So you two can work together without any problems." "Of course," Vivian lied, her mind racing as she processed the implications. Working with Elliot would mean daily meetings, business trips together, hours of intimate collaboration on a project that would demand total professional focus. "There's one more thing," Margaret said, and her tone became more serious. "This case will require total dedication for the next 6 months. I'm talking 60-hour weeks, constant travel, and zero margin for personal distractions." The word distractions was pronounced with particular emphasis that made Vivian understand that Margaret knew much more than she was revealing. "I understand. I hope you really do, because the last thing we need is personal complications interfering with a case of this magnitude." That afternoon, Vivian was in her office trying to concentrate on the preliminary documentation when her assistant announced a visitor. She didn't even have time to ask who it was before Elliot appeared at the door, impeccable in a dark grey suit that accentuated his eyes. "Surprise," he said with a cautious smile. "Elliot." She stood up, trying to maintain professional composure even with her stomach churning. "I imagine you know why you're here, the Morrison-Blackstone case." He closed the door behind him and approached her desk. "Vivian, I didn't know you'd be the lead attorney when I accepted the contract. And if you had known?" He hesitated. "Honestly, I don't know. Maybe I would have declined, maybe not." "How comforting." "Look." Elliot sat in the chair across from her desk, and Vivian noticed how uncomfortable he seemed, a more mature version of the man she was learning to love again. "I know this complicates things between us." "Complicates?" Vivian laughed without humor. "Elliot, my boss just told me this case is the opportunity of my career, that I need total dedication and zero personal distractions. And now I find out that the distraction she was referring to is sitting in front of me." She said that? Not in those words, but Margaret didn't get where she is by being subtle. Elliot ran his hand through his hair, a gesture she remembered well from when he was nervous. "So what do we do?" I don't know. The brutal honesty of the words came out before she could filter them. This is the case of my dreams, Elliot. It's everything I've worked for over the years. And me? The question hung between them like a time bomb. Vivian looked at him, really looked at him, and saw not just the confident consultant who had walked into her office, but the man who had taken care of her when she was exhausted, who remembered how she liked her gin and tonic, who had promised never to hurt her again. I don't know where you fit into this, she admitted, and the words hurt coming out. Vivian, no. She stood up, walking to the window so she wouldn't have to look at him. Don't make this harder than it already is. Harder for whom? For you or for your career? They're the same thing. Frustration exploded from her. My career is my life, Elliot. It's who I am. No, it's not. He stood up too, walking until he was behind her. Your career is what you do. It's not who you are. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. I used to be exactly like that, obsessed with work, defining my worth by the next deal, the next success. But you know what I discovered? When you reach the top alone, the view is beautiful, but there's no one to share it with. Vivian closed her eyes, feeling the warmth of his body near her. What if I choose you and everything goes wrong? What if I lose both my career and you? What if you choose your career and lose the chance to have something real, something worth more than any contract? It's not fair, she whispered. No, it's not. They stood in silence, the weight of the situation settling between them. Outside, Washington, D.C. continued its frantic pace, indifferent to the personal drama unfolding on the 42nd floor. I need time, Vivian said finally. How much time? I don't know, a few days, a week. I need to talk to Margaret, understand exactly what the rules are. Elliot turned to leave but stopped at the door. Vivian? Yes? Regardless of what you decide, I want you to know that these last few weeks have been the best I've had in years. Elliot, and if you decide that your career is more important, I'll understand. I won't like it, but I'll understand. After he left, Vivian stood at the window for a long time watching the traffic below. Small people running from one place to another, all chasing some version of success. For the first time in her career, she wondered if there was a difference between chasing success and chasing happiness, and even scarier, if she'd have enough courage to find out the answer. Vivian spent 3 days agonizing over the decision. 3 days analyzing every angle, weighing pros and cons, making mental lists that changed every hour. 3 days avoiding Elliot in the elevator, leaving earlier for work and coming back later, as if she could indefinitely postpone the conversation they both knew needed to happen. It was on Thursday that Margaret called her back to her office. I need an answer, Vivian, the partner said without preamble. The clients are arriving from London next week, and I need to know if you're totally committed to this case. I am, Vivian replied, surprised by the firmness in her own voice. And Mr. Bennett? Vivian took a deep breath. I'll talk to him today. Professionally, there won't be any problems. Good, because I just learned that Christina Valdez, from Valdez Consulting, is also interested in working with us on this case. If there are any complications with Mr. Bennett, she'd be more than willing to take over his role. The name Christina Valdez made Vivian's stomach turn. She knew the consultant's reputation, brilliant, ambitious, and famous for getting everything she wanted, professionally or personally. That won't be necessary, Vivian said quickly. Like I said, there won't be any problems. That night, she found Elliot waiting in the lobby when she got home from work. He was sitting in one of the leather armchairs, still wearing his work suit, but with his tie loosened and his hair slightly disheveled. When he saw her, he stood up immediately. We need to talk, they said simultaneously, and despite the tension, Vivian almost smiled. In his apartment, sitting on the same couch where they'd shared music and kisses just a few nights before, the silence weighed between them like a physical presence. I've made a decision, Elliot said finally. Me too, Vivian replied. You first. No, you. Elliot ran his hand through his hair, that nervous gesture she already knew so well. I'm stepping down from the case. What? Vivian turned to face him completely. Elliot, no, you can't do that. It's already done. I called Margaret this morning and told her I had a family emergency and need to step away from the project. That's a lie. It is. But it's a necessary lie. He looked directly into her eyes. Vivian, this is the case of your lifetime. You said so yourself. I'm not going to be the reason you lose this opportunity. What about your job? This contract is worth millions to you. There are other contracts, other opportunities. His voice was calm, decided. But you only have one chance to lead a case like this. Vivian stood up, walking to the window. I was going to choose the case, Elliot. I was going to end this between us to focus on work. I know. How do you know? Because I know you, and because it's the right choice. Is it? She turned to face him. Then why does it feel so wrong? Elliot stood up too, walking over to her. Because maybe sometimes the right choice and the easy choice aren't the same thing. I don't understand why you're doing this, because I love you. The words hung suspended in the air between them. Vivian felt as if the ground had disappeared from under her feet. Elliot, I love you, Vivian. And when you truly love someone, you put that person's happiness before your own. But what if my happiness includes you? Then maybe we'll find a way after you conquer the world. He smiled, but there was sadness in his eyes. I'm not giving up on us. I'm just taking a step back so you can take 2 steps forward. Before Vivian could respond, Elliot's phone rang. He answered, and she watched his expression gradually change as he spoke. That was my partner, he said after hanging up. Christina Valdez is spreading rumors that I abandoned the Morrison Blackstone project for personal reasons. She's trying to get the contract for herself. That, Vivian started, but Elliot raised his hand. It doesn't matter. Let her have the contract. What do you mean it doesn't matter, Elliot? She's destroying your reputation. My reputation will recover, but if I stay on this case and complicate things for you, it could affect your career forever. Vivian stared at him, seeing the determination in his eyes and feeling something break inside her chest. I hate this. Me too. And now? What happens to us? Elliot walked over to her, taking her face in his hands. Now you're going to be incredible on this case. You're going to show everyone why you're the best lawyer of your generation, and I'll be here rooting for you, even if from afar. And after that, we'll see what happens. They kissed then, a desperate kiss full of everything they couldn't say in words. When they separated, Vivian's eyes were teary. This isn't goodbye, she whispered. No, he agreed. It's see you later. But even as he said it, Vivian knew that something had changed irrevocably between them. Elliot's sacrifice was noble, generous, and completely selfless, and that scared her more than any professional conflict could. 2 weeks later, when she learned that Elliot had accepted a 6-month contract in Brazil, partially, she suspected, to escape the situation with Christina Valdez, Vivian locked herself in the office bathroom and cried for the first time in years. Not because he had left, but because she finally understood what she had lost when she let him go the first time. And now, even with the case of her dreams in her hands and a career that was finally taking off, Vivian wondered if success was really worth anything when you had no one to share it with. The answer, she discovered, was more complicated than she'd ever imagined. 6 months. 6 months since Elliot had left for Brazil. 6 months since Vivian had completely immersed herself in the Morrison Blackstone case, turning it into the professional triumph Margaret had promised it would be. 6 months of 16-hour days, international travel, and a reputation that now preceded her in all of Washington's corporate circles. And 6 months since she'd temporarily moved to Seattle, accepting a transfer that put more distance between her and the memories that haunted every corner of the apartment in D.C. The move had been good for her, Vivian admitted. Seattle was different, greener, quieter, with a pace that allowed her to actually breathe for the first time in years. She'd rented a loft in the Capitol Hill district, had started cooking again, and even adopted an orange kitten that Daisy had reluctantly accepted as a housemate. But even with all the change and growth, there were nights, especially the rainy ones, which in Seattle were almost all of them, when she found herself wondering where Elliot was, what he was doing, if he thought about her as much as she thought about him. It was on one of those rainy Thursday nights that the invitation arrived. An elegant envelope, heavy cream paper, delivered by a messenger who waited while she signed the receipt. Inside, an invitation to a charity gala in New York. A night of music and memories, benefiting a music education foundation. On the back of the invitation, a handwritten note in the handwriting she would recognize anywhere. "Please come. I need to see you." Vivian stood in the kitchen for 15 minutes, holding the invitation, feeling her heart race in a way she hadn't felt in months. Daisy, now more mature and apparently wiser, sat at her feet and looked at her with that expression only animals can have, as if they knew exactly what was happening and were silently judging human choices. "I shouldn't go," Vivian told the poodle. Daisy tilted her head, clearly disagreeing. 3 days later, she was on a flight to New York, wearing a navy blue dress she'd bought specifically for the occasion and trying not to overanalyze what that meant. The event was held at the Rainbow Room, atop 30 Rockefeller Plaza. Manhattan's nighttime view stretched beyond the panoramic windows, and the live music, a string quartet playing classical pieces, created an atmosphere that was simultaneously elegant and intimate. Vivian arrived fashionably late, a calculated strategy to avoid the anxiety of waiting and to ensure the party was already underway when she made her entrance. She accepted a champagne flute from a waiter and circulated through the ballroom, greeting acquaintances and pretending she was paying attention to conversations about corporate mergers and changes in federal regulations. It was when the music changed that she saw him. The quartet had begun playing a version of The Way You Look Tonight, and in the center of the dance floor, Elliot was talking to a stunning brunette woman that Vivian immediately recognized as Christina Valdez. He looked different, more tanned, hair slightly longer, and there was something in his posture that suggested a new, more relaxed confidence. The suit he wore was impeccable, but he seemed more comfortable in his own skin than she remembered. Christina was laughing at something he'd said, one hand resting lightly on his arm, in a way that made Vivian's stomach twist with jealousy she didn't expect to feel. "He came back last week," a voice said behind her. Vivian turned to find James Morrison, one of the main clients from the case that had launched her career. They'd developed a professional friendship during the months working together. "James." She smiled, genuinely happy to see him. "I didn't know you'd be here. I've been a foundation sponsor for years. Music education is important to me." He followed her gaze toward Elliot and Christina. "Did you know he'd be here?" "He sent the invitation." "Ah." James took a sip of his whiskey. "And how do you feel about that?" "Confused," Vivian admitted, surprising herself with the honesty. "Want some advice from someone who's been married 3 times? Please. Sometimes the person you need to be when you're with someone is different from the person you need to be to grow alone. And sometimes, if you're lucky, you find someone again after you've both grown." Before Vivian could respond, she felt a familiar presence behind her. She turned and there he was, Elliot, even more handsome up close, with those eyes she'd memorized and dreamed about for months. "Hi," he said simply. "Hi," she replied, and for a moment they just looked at each other, years of history and months of separation weighing in the air between them. "You came. You asked me to come." "I did, but I wasn't sure you would." James discreetly stepped away, leaving them alone in the middle of the elegant crowd. "How was Brazil?" Vivian asked, searching for safe territory to start. "Transformative." Elliot smiled, and there was something different in his smile, more genuine, less calculated. "I worked with sustainable technology startups, learned Portuguese, surfed for the first time in my life." "You surfed?" Vivian couldn't help but smile. "The Elliot Bennett I know is afraid of deep water. The Elliot Bennett you knew was afraid of many things, including admitting when he was wrong." The music changed to something slower, more intimate, and couples began moving to the dance floor. "Dance with me?" Elliot extended his hand. Vivian hesitated for just a moment before accepting. Her hand fit into his as if they'd never been apart, and when he pulled her into his arms on the dance floor, she remembered how good it felt to be close to him. "You're different," she said as they moved slowly to the music. "You too. More peaceful, maybe. Less tense." "Seattle has that effect on people." "Seattle?" "I transferred 4 months ago. I needed a fresh start." They danced in silence for a few moments, and Vivian allowed herself to simply feel the familiar scent of his cologne, the way his hand fit perfectly at the curve of her back, the feeling of being home that she'd tried to bury for months. "Vivian," Elliot said finally, his voice low near her ear. "Yes? I missed you. Every single day." She closed her eyes, allowing herself to absorb the words. "Elliot, I know things are complicated. I know we've both changed, that our lives are different now, but I needed to see you. I needed to know if there's still something here." Vivian pulled back enough to look into his eyes. "And is there?" "On my part, yes. Stronger than ever. And Christina." Elliot followed her gaze toward the brunette woman who was now chatting animatedly with other guests. "Christina is a business partner, maybe a friend, but she's not you." "How can I be sure?" "Because I'm telling you. And because you know me better than anyone in this world." The music was ending, and Vivian knew they needed to make a decision. Go back to their separate lives, or try something that had haunted them both for months. "What are you proposing?" she asked. "That we start over. Slowly, no rush, like two adults who've learned some things about themselves, who discovered that everything we achieved means nothing if we don't have someone to share it with. And how would that work practically?" Elliot smiled, and this time the smile reached his eyes. "Honestly, I have no idea, but I think it's worth finding out." The last note of the music echoed through the ballroom, and they stood still on the dance floor, still embraced, while the world around them continued spinning. And for the first time in months, Vivian allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, some happy endings were worth fighting for. 3 weeks after the gala, Vivian was sitting in a cafe in Valencia, California, watching the waves break on the beach through the window, when Elliot arrived. He had suggested the coastal city as a meeting point. "Neutral territory," he'd joked during one of their long nighttime phone conversations that had become routine since New York. A place that belonged neither to their past nor to their current separate lives, but that could perhaps belong to the future. "Sorry I'm late," he said, kissing her cheek before sitting down. "Traffic on the Pacific Coast Highway was impossible." "No problem. I was taking the opportunity to explore the city." Vivian smiled, pushing a coffee cup in his direction. "I ordered your usual latte with extra cinnamon the way you like it." "You remembered." "I remember everything about you, Elliot. I always have." They looked at each other for a moment, and Vivian felt that familiar electric current that had always existed between them, but now tempered with something new. Patience, perhaps, or the wisdom that came from having learned to live alone. "So," Elliot said, taking a sip of his coffee, "did you have time to think about our conversation yesterday?" The conversation. It had been one of the most honest they'd ever had, about what they wanted, about what they were willing to change, and about what they wouldn't negotiate. Vivian had talked about her new international law office she was considering opening. Elliot had mentioned his idea of expanding his consultancy to include sustainability and corporate social responsibility. "I did," she replied. "And you? Do you still think Valencia is the answer?" "I think Valencia is a possibility. A city that's between Seattle and Sao Paulo, between your new life and the transformation I had in Brazil. A place where we can build something together without either of us having to give up who we've become." Vivian looked out the window again, watching a couple walking on the beach with their dog. "You know what attracts me most about this idea?" "What?" "It's not about sacrifice this time. It's not about one person giving up their dreams for the other. It's about two people choosing to build new dreams together." "Exactly." Elliot leaned forward, his eyes shining with enthusiasm. "Vivian, I researched the legal market here. There's a growing demand for lawyers specializing in international law, especially with all the tech startups expanding into global markets. You could have the kind of practice you always wanted, smaller, more focused, but with complex international cases. And you?" "I already have 3 potential clients here. Companies that want to become more sustainable, but need strategic guidance to do it without compromising profitability." He paused, studying her face. "But it only works if we both really want this. If we're not just running away from our current lives, but running towards something better." Vivian thought about Seattle, the loft that had become a home, the colleagues she'd learned to appreciate, the quiet life she'd built. Then she thought about DC, The apartment full of memories, the career that had reached its peak, the constant feeling of chasing something that never completely satisfied her. "I visited an office yesterday," she admitted. "Downtown, a historic building that was renovated with an ocean view. The owner said there's space for 2 tenants, a law firm and a consultancy maybe." The smile that spread across Elliot's face was like sunrise. "Seriously? Very seriously. And Elliot?" She reached across the table, intertwining her fingers with his. "I want this. Not because I'm running away from something, but because for the first time in years, I'm excited about the future. Even knowing it's going to be hard. Starting over, building our practices from scratch, learning to live together as the people we've become. Especially knowing it's going to be hard." Vivian squeezed his hand. "Easy things are never worth as much." They sat in silence for a moment, absorbing the magnitude of the decision they'd just made. Through the window, the sun was beginning to set over the Pacific, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. "There's one more thing," Elliot said, his voice slightly nervous. "What?" "Cooper. He's really missed Daisy. I'm sure it would be devastating for him if we moved to opposite sides of the country again." Vivian laughed, a genuine musical laugh that made several people in the cafe look in their direction. "Oh, of course. We're doing this for the dogs. Obviously. We're altruistic people, thinking only of the emotional well-being of our pets." "Obviously." They looked at each other and laughed together, and Vivian realized that this was it. This ease, this ability to find joy in small things, this feeling that everything was possible when they were together. "When?" she asked. "When what?" "When do we do this? When do we start our new life?" Elliot thought for a moment. "How about 3 months? That gives us time to organize our current lives, find a place to live, set up the offices, and get used to the idea that we're really going to do this." He agreed. Vivian looked at the man sitting across from her. No longer the arrogant young man she'd known years ago, nor the charming neighbor who had reappeared in her life months ago. This was Elliot in his most evolved form, mature, thoughtful, and still capable of making her heart race with a simple smile. "Elliot?" "Yes?" "I love you. The current version of you, not the memory of who you used to be. And I love the version of myself that I become when I'm with you, not dependent or diminished, but more complete." "Vivian Carter," he said, lifting her hand to kiss her knuckles. "You are the most extraordinary woman I've ever known, and I can't wait to discover who we can become together." When they left the cafe an hour later, holding hands and walking slowly toward the beach, Vivian allowed herself to dream about the future in a way she hadn't in years. Not a future based on fear or scarcity, but one built on abundance, of possibilities, of love, and of the certainty that sometimes the best adventures begin when you stop running from something and start running toward someone. Valencia's sunset had never looked more perfect. A year later, on a golden October morning, Vivian woke up to the sound of waves breaking on the beach and Daisy licking her face with canine enthusiasm. "Good morning to you too, Princess," she murmured, scratching behind the poodle's ears. On the other side of the bed, Cooper raised his massive golden head, yawned dramatically, and decided it was still too early to be awake. The house they'd bought in Valencia was small, 2 bedrooms, a shared office, and a deck that opened directly onto the beach. It wasn't grand, like the apartments they'd both had in their previous lives, but it was perfect in a way no space had ever been before. Vivian got up carefully so as not to wake Elliot, put on a robe and went out to the deck with a cup of coffee. The ocean stretched infinitely before her, painted in shades of gold and pink by the morning light, and she couldn't believe this was her life now. The past year had been a roller coaster of changes. Setting up her own international law office had been more challenging than expected, but also more rewarding. She had a growing clientele of tech startups that needed to navigate international regulations, and she loved the diversity of cases and closeness with her clients. Elliot had also thrived. His sustainability consultancy had taken off faster than anyone had predicted, and he was constantly traveling between Valencia and San Francisco, helping companies implement more responsible practices without sacrificing profitability. But the best part had been learning to live together again, Not as the young, stubborn people they had been, but as the mature, secure adults they'd become. Thinking about something specific? Elliot appeared behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. Thinking that today's the day. Nervous? Excited, she corrected, leaning back against him. Very excited. The ceremony would be small, just 20 guests on the beach behind their house. Margaret had flown in from DC, James Morrison would come from New York, and some of the new friends they'd made in Valencia would complete the list. Even Mr. Martinez had managed to travel from Washington to be present. "Did your dad arrive yesterday?" Elliot asked. "He did. He and my mom are at the hotel, probably arguing about how she should have brought a warmer jacket." Vivian smiled. "They loved you, by the way. My mom told me you aged well." High praise from Mrs. Carter. She's not wrong. They stood embraced in silence, watching a group of surfers catching the first waves of the day. It was a scene they'd observed hundreds of times in the past year, but it never got old. "Elliot? Do you have any regrets? About anything? About the time we lost being proud and stubborn? Sometimes." He turned her in his arms so they could look at each other. "But not about the path that brought us here. I think we needed to grow separately before we could grow together, even though it hurt, especially because it hurt. Things that are worthwhile usually hurt a little." At 4 in the afternoon, Vivian was standing in front of the bedroom mirror, adjusting her dress for the 10th time. It wasn't a traditional wedding dress. She'd chosen something in cream tones, flowing and simple, that moved beautifully in the beach breeze. "You look beautiful," her mother said from the doorway with tears in her eyes. "Thank you, Mom." Vivian turned to hug her. "Thank you for being here, for supporting this. Sweetheart, anyone can see that you two love each other. Real, mature love. It's rare and precious." A noise at the door made them turn. Daisy had appeared, wearing a cream silk bow around her neck, followed closely by Cooper with a similar bow in navy blue. Both dogs had been officially designated as ring bearers, an idea that had made both Vivian and Elliot laugh until they cried when they planned the ceremony. "Looks like your witnesses are ready," her mother observed. The ceremony was exactly as they had dreamed. Simple, intimate, with bare feet in the sand and the sound of the ocean as soundtrack. The officiant was a longtime friend of Elliot's from Brazil, who had flown in especially for the occasion. But it was during the vows that Vivian truly felt the weight of the moment. Elliot spoke first, his voice clear and steady as he looked directly into her eyes. "Vivian, I promise to be your partner, not your savior. I promise to support your dreams, not control them. I promise to love the incredible woman you are today, and the even more incredible woman you'll become tomorrow. And I promise that no matter what challenges we face, we'll face them together, as equals who chose to build an extraordinary life together." When it was Vivian's turn, she took a deep breath and spoke from her heart. "Elliot, I promise to trust you with my fears and insecurities, not just my strengths. I promise to be vulnerable when it's hard and strong when you need me to be. I promise I'll choose you every day, not out of necessity or fear of being alone, but because you're my best friend, my biggest supporter, and the man who makes me want to be the best version of myself." When they kissed after exchanging rings, with Daisy and Cooper barking excitedly in the sand beside them, Vivian felt as if the entire universe was in its right place. The reception was on the house deck, with fairy lights strung between palm trees and a long table decorated with local wildflowers. There were speeches full of laughter and tears, dancing in the sand under the stars, and moments of pure joy that Vivian knew she'd remember forever. But it was later, after the guests had gone home and they were alone on the beach with the dogs, that she truly absorbed the reality of her new life. "So," Elliot said, taking off his tie and rolling up his shirt sleeves, "how does it feel being Mrs. Bennet?" "Actually, I'm keeping Carter professionally," she said with a mischievous smile. "But personally, I feel like I'm finally home." They walked along the water's edge, waves wetting their feet, Cooper running ahead of them while Daisy walked with dignity beside Vivian. "You know what strikes me most about all this?" Vivian said, stopping to look at the stars reflected in the water. "What?" "That it wasn't about finding our other half or completing each other. It was about two complete people choosing to build something even better together." Elliot pulled her into his arms, kissing her softly under the moonlight. To two complete people building something extraordinary, forever. And as they walked back home, their life, their future, Vivian knew with absolute certainty that sometimes the best stories aren't about broken people being fixed by love, but about whole people choosing to grow together. And that, she thought with a smile, was the most beautiful love story of all. And so Vivian discovered that true love wasn't about finding someone to complete her, but about two complete souls choosing to grow side by side. Sometimes we lose people only to find them again when we're ready to love them the right way. Because in the end, the best love stories aren't about salvation, they're about choice. Every day, again and again. And you? What kind of love are you choosing to build in your life? If this story touched your heart, please hit the like button. Subscribe to the channel for more tales that speak to the soul, and tell us in the comments, where are you listening to this message from? Your support is what allows us to keep bringing stories that inspire and move hearts.